It was a time of turmoil, a time when the world was on the brink of a cataclysmic event that would change the course of history forever. The year was 1914, and the world was at war. The Great War, they called it. A conflict that would eventually claim millions of lives and leave an indelible mark on the psyche of humanity. As the first shots rang out across Europe, people watched in horror as the world they knew was torn apart by the flames of war. Young men from every corner of the globe donned their uniforms and marched off to fight for their countries, their families, and their beliefs. For many, it was a chance to prove their courage and their loyalty, a chance to be a part of something greater than themselves. For others, it was a nightmare come to life, a never ending cycle of death and destruction that seemed to have no end. In the midst of this chaos, the German youth and the Allies were forced down to bring their every single man into this war. Karl Schotterberg was just a boy when he joined the German army. He had grown up in a small village in Bavaria, where life was simple and the world seemed small. But Karl was ambitious, and he wanted more from life than what his village could offer him. When war broke out in Europe, Karl saw it as his chance to prove himself. He knew that joining the army was risky, but he was determined to do whatever it takes to serve his country. After basic training, Karl was sent to the Western Front. He quickly realized that the war was not what he had imagined it to be. The trenches were cramped, cold and filled with the stench of death. The constant sound of gunfire and artillery made it impossible to sleep, and the fear of death was always present. Despite the hardships, Karl remained determined. Karl had been fighting on the Western Front for over a year now. He had seen countless men fall on both sides of the trenches and had lost many friends and comrades. Despite this, he remained committed to his duty and loyal to his country. One day, Hans and his units received orders to advance towards the enemy lines. They were to take a fortified position that had been heavily defended for months. Karl knew that this would be a difficult task, but he was ready to do whatever it takes to achieve victory. As they moved forward, they were met with a hail of bullets and artillery fire. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the stench of death hung in the air. But Karl and his fellow soldiers pressed on, determined to take the position at any cost. After hours of fighting, they finally managed to breach the enemy's defenses. Karl could hear the cries of wounded soldiers on both sides, and he could see the devastation that had been wrought upon the landscape. But he knew that this was the price of war. As he surveyed the battlefield, Karl noticed something strange. There was a lone enemy soldier lying wounded and helpless on the ground. Karl could have easily killed him, but instead he decided to approach him. As he got closer, he saw that the soldier was just a boy, no older than 16. He was terrified and in great pain, but Karl could see that he was also filled with deep sense of pride and loyalty to his country. For a moment, Karl and the enemy soldier stared at each other, each wondering what the other would do. But then something remarkable happened. Hans extended his hand, offering to help the wounded soldier to his feet. The enemy soldier hesitated at first, but then slowly reached out and took Karl's hand. Together, the soldiers stood up, both surprised by others' gesture of compassion. For a brief moment, there was peace on the Western Front. The two soldiers stood up, looking at each other with a newfound understanding and respect. They knew that they were both just young men caught up in a senseless war that had torn apart their world. Eventually, Karl and the enemy soldier parted ways, each returning to their own lines, but something had changed between them. They had seen each other as human beings, rather than just enemies to be killed. Karl never forgot that encounter on the battlefield. For him, it was a reminder that despite the horrors of war, there was still hope for peace and understanding, and he knew that no matter what happened, he would always carry that memory with him until he dies.